welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I will be working on the transmission bands of the Model T. The Ford Model T uses a planetary gear transmission. In many ways, it is similar to the early automatics of more modern times. In that way, it is similar because it uses planetary gears and bands to change the ratios. The gears never come unmeshed or meshed. They do not disengage like a normal manual would. In a way, they're kind of a manual automatic, because when you push the pedal, it tightens a band down on a drum that stops one set of gears moving to allow another set to move. Now, I came across a really cool video that explains how planetary gears work, so I'll link that in the description if you're curious. It's a pretty cool concept, and it's really amazing that they decided to do this with the Model T way back in 1908. Now, the transmission bands were originally lined with cotton, and you can still get the cotton for the early cars. In 26, they changed the band sizes and made a wider brake band. They don't remake cotton bands for those years, so you can't use cotton. They also have wood bands. And now this was a period accessory for the Model T because the wood will not wear out as fast as the cotton will. So instead of cotton squeezing on the drum, they used pieces of steam bent wood on the inside of the bands, and that grips down on the drum to stop the drum from moving. So it's like a wood-lined brake shoe almost. Really interesting. They provided a lot more grab than the cotton did. So they were kind of a performance upgrade. They lasted longer than the cotton. So it was a period accessory to have wood bands. Some people still do use them today, and you can get them for any year of Model T with wood bands. You can get them and install them. Some people say they clatter, they make weird noises. Some people really like them. I am not going to go with wood bands, but it is an option. One downside to them is they seem to, if they fail catastrophically, and you get wood splinters all over in your engine, and that doesn't sound like it'd be too good. But they do work, and a lot of people do use them, so it is an option. I'm going to be using Kevlar bands. So that is by far the most common option today, is to use Kevlar. And because Kevlar is really similar to the cotton, it behaves similar to cotton, but it lasts a whole lot longer. It's a lot more durable. The cotton bands had a really varying lifespan. You don't really know how long you'd get out of them. I've heard some people say 1,000 miles, some more than that. I really have no idea how long the cotton lasts. Of course, it depends on your driving characteristics, if you drive it correctly or not. If you allow the bands to slip and the drum to slip inside the bands, that's obviously going to wear more of the cotton down, versus if you push it hard and firm, actually squeeze it down and stop the drum, then it's not going to wear nearly as fast. So the condition of the drums, the condition of the bands, and your driving habits can drastically affect the life of cotton bands. The Kevlar bands, similar. They behave similar to cotton, but they do have some differences, most notably the heat transfer. Kevlar does not transfer heat as much as cotton does, so it's going to hold in more heat. So if you do drive them incorrectly, use them incorrectly, or they're adjusted incorrectly so that the band and the drum slips inside the band, then the drums can heat up too much and actually warp. You can get them to heat up many hundreds of degrees and turn blue and start to warp and do weird things. So that's not good. So if you use the Kevlar, you have to be really sure that it is adjusted correctly, that you're actually getting the band to go tight enough that it'll stop the drum. Because if it doesn't stop it all the way, the drum kind of slowly moves in it. It will build up heat within the drum and can really damage your transmission drums. So that's the only downside to Kevlar. You just have to be sure it's installed properly and you drive it correctly. Not that hard. It can be done, and a lot of people use Kevlar. It is by far the most common option, especially on the 26 and 7s, because you can't use cotton because they don't make them in the proper sizes for these cars. So Kevlar is by far the most common option, and that is what I will be using to reline my bands with.
So now I have finished the first two transmission bands, the low gear and reverse gear bands, the narrower ones on my car. And this, I was able to work out a system for getting this to work pretty good. I watched a couple of videos on YouTube of other people who do transmission bands and have done them before, and used a couple tips from them, as well as the instructions that came with my bands. And each band maker is going to recommend something a little bit differently. And with these Kevlar bands, this maker recommended having the edges of the lining flush with the edge of the band. Some makers will have it extend a little bit beyond the edge, so you always just got to check the instructions from the specific band that you have, but it's really not all that hard. so I still have the wider brake band to do, and I'm going to show you my method of doing this now with this band. So the first thing you have to do is attach the band on both ends or attach the lining on both ends of the band first, and then do the middle, because this lining is a tiny bit longer than it would seem needed, although it kind of forces its way in lower and works. But the lining fits in there flush on both sides, and it leaves a little loop down in the bottom. So you have to do the two top ends first, and then you can work out this loop down here in the bottom. So kind of like that, it'll leave a little excess down in the bottom. So you got to do the first top two rivets first, and then you can work it out all even, and then do the bottom ones and work your way out to the sides. So to rivet it, these just have brass split rivets. See if I can get a good angle on that. So it's just a brass rivet with a split in the middle. So there's a couple of different methods of installing the rivet. What I have found works is to use an awl or a punch. So here's my punch. So I have this little punch that is a square tip on it, and it works really well for rivets. It's actually what it's made for, is rivets like this. So I can punch two holes. I'll line the lining up to the hole, put it on this anvil, and then I just have a little chunk of old leather on here. You could use any kind of rubber, just something so you don't dent up the edge of the punch. But what I do is I line it up where it's supposed to be, and then use this to punch two holes for the rivet heads, or the rivets legs to go through. And so I'll do one on each top and bottom. Now there's a couple different ways of splitting the rivets. Some people will want to split it so the two halves of the rivet go lengthwise along the band. Some will split them crosswise. And I've heard pluses and minuses for both ways. Some people say you want to do it crossways, because if you do it this way, the transmission drum could catch a lip of the rivet and bend it open. The old linings that were on this were riveted this direction though, and they hadn't come off yet. The makers for the bands recommend either direction. They say it doesn't matter, and it's a lot easier to do it this direction, and I found that it's easier to get a good solid split in the rivet to do it this way. And I'll show you how I do that and why that's better. So what I'll do is I'll use the punch a hole top and bottom, and then poke through this rivet while it's on this leather. I'll kind of tap it through with a hammer to where it goes all the way through and sticks out the other side. So let's see if we can get that done. See right there. So now we have the rivet poked through the band lining material. So the way I have been splitting the rivet to drive it in is with this round bar clamped in a vise. So this works really well. It is what was recommended by this band manufacturer. What you can do is you can place it over the vise with the split of the rivet on the bar, and then just tap the top of the rivet, and that will spread the tines of the rivet and force them back into the band lining material. So that seems to work really well, and that is why I decided to run the split of the rivets lengthwise along the band versus crossways, because it was a lot easier to set this on the bar and split them lengthwise than it would be to try and do it sideways up around the band. You couldn't do it with this bar method clamped in a vise if you're trying to split them horizontal to the band lining. A lot more to do it vertically. So that is the way I have decided to do it, and it has seemed to work really well. So I'll split it over there, I'll bring it here, put it back on the anvil, and then just do a couple more taps with the ball peen on it just to drive it further into the band material and give it a good dip into it so that the tines of the rivets are set in pretty deeply. So there are the two top rivets. I was sure to peen these pretty hard with the ball peen hammer so that there's a noticeable indent right there, so that there's none of that rivet is going to be rubbing when this is on the transmission. So we've got a good depth on both of those and a wide split. And these two top rivets are obviously the most important because that's at the top of the band. It's the only thing holding this band from getting folded in. So I've been trying to make sure that the top ones are really good. And as a result, I've accidentally bent a couple of the rivets, and that is beginner's error, I think. But you can't, they don't give any extra rivets in this kit, and I've tried straightening these and they don't like to work once they've been bent once. So I gotta look into getting some extra rivets to finish this off. I'm not gonna have enough to get the rest of this done, but I can put a couple left in this until I get more. But you can see the extra left over from doing the two ends, and this is normal. You just kind of have to work this down into the material to get it all tightened up so there's a lot of tension in it. If you work at this a little bit, it will tighten up and this will go away. So you just got to kind of work it down until you get all of the slack taken out of it, and then you can do the bottom rivet next along the bottom here, and then work your way out to the sides after that, and that'll kind of even out this tension in the band lining material. So I think that's just about it for these bands for right now. I'm going to get some more rivets to finish off this band, and we'll put these back in the transmission when we assemble the engine here shortly.